Good morning and good afternoon again. This is Ramya from Exxat. Thank you for joining us for the Wishlist webinar, which is part of the Exxat Prism training series. Helping me today on this webinar are two of my colleagues, Ami and Ayaz. Ayaz will be doing the presentation today. A few housekeeping announcements before we get started. This webinar is recorded and you will receive a copy of the recording approximately 2 hours after the webinar is complete. You will also be able to find the recording on our Exxat channel on Vimeo, posted under the showcase titled Exxat Prism Training Series. You will find today's presentation attached in the handout section in the GoToWebinar control panel. Feel free to follow along. Please use the question section to ask questions or comment throughout the presentation. We will be manning the questions and addressing them during our scheduled question breaks. If you are having technical difficulties, please use the chat box and we will help you with that. Today we have an audience from multiple disciplines, I guess. Therefore, we will be using screenshots and data from different disciplines across our slides. We will also use a combination of live system and slides as needed. So I'm handing it over to Ayaz. Ayaz, over to you.
Good, Ramya. Hi, everyone. My name is Ayaz, and I'm with the Client Success Specialist team here at Exxat. So it's amazing today to do this webinar so that, I can go ahead and share more information and details about how we gather student preferences for the placement. Now, moving on, as you can see my photograph right there, let's move on to the next slide. First thing that we need to understand is what is a wish list. Now, a wish list is something where you're asking your students for their preferences with regards to their placement. Now, in most cases, normally a program or a school would do this is that they will reach out to their students and, in the traditional method, they would just get their preferences from the students and then someone would be sitting and making all those matches. But with Exact, that's not how it works. What we do is we give you a list of different types of wish lists where you have the ability and the freedom to select those types and get required preferences from your students so that you can make the most accurate matches for their place. Moving on onto the next slide, we will first see what are the different types of wish lists that we have available with the Exxat Prism system. So the first one that you see on this list over here is just what I've done is I've just made like a comprehensive page of all the different wish lists that Exxat provides, along with what exactly is done in these wish lists. So if you notice, the first one is a slot-based wish list where you actually get the students' preferences based on the available slots for a particular site or a location. Moving on, the location-based wish list is something where you get your students' preferences based on the available site and location. Now, here the difference is in the previous one, we were looking at the slot. Here we are only looking at the location. In a similar fashion, we've got all of these different types of wish lists, which we will be learning in detail today as to how does the setup happen and how does the student access the same. Okay. Moving on from there, we will first see a quick, visual understanding of how these wish lists are placed. So the first thing is that on the slot-based wish list, if you notice, it says the first step is to ask the preceptors or the sites when they can accept your students. The second step would be to ask the students to rank those sites and preceptors, and that actually can accept them. And then the third step would be the final one where you can actually make the match. In a similar fashion, let's move on to the next one, which is a location-based wish list. So here the step one is asking the students to rank the sites and preceptors that can accept them. The second step would be to ask the sites and preceptors when they can accept the student. And then the third step is to accordingly make the match. Moving on, the third one over here is a setting-based wish list. Now, this is relatively new and not very frequently used, but then I would want to explain this to you. So in a setting-based wish list, you will ask your students to rank the settings in which they are interested. And then similarly, as soon as you get those responses from your students, you can go ahead and make the matches. Moving on from there, the approaches for the location area-based wish list. Now, in your locations and sites tab, you must have noticed that something that says in area, out of state, those types of location areas. You also have the ability of creating a wish list based on those location areas. So here you will be making the first step would be to ask the students to rank the areas in which they're interested, and then the final step would be to make the match. Moving on in the similar fashion for the questionnaire-based wish list. Now here what happens is in some scenarios, some programs or specific programs, they want to ask some detailed questions to their students, and based on those questions, they want to make the placement for that student. So here you can also create a list of questions that you want to ask your students, and then based on that, you can make the placement. Moving on, the next one is the address preference based wish list, where you ask the students to rank their preferred address from where they're interested, and then you immediately go ahead and make the match once you get the responses. Moving on, the next one is a my request based wish list. Now, here, this one is a relatively simpler kind of a wish list where you're just asking your students to find their own sites and preceptors. Once you have that information, you go ahead and make the match. Now, most probably, this type of a wish list is used with the nursing programs. So, relatively, it's also known to be like, very rarely used. Moving on to the next one, which is a rotation preference based wish list. Now, in this one, you ask the student to rank the rotation date in which they're interested. And as soon as you have that information, you can go ahead and make the match. Now that we've just gone ahead and got an understanding of the visual bit of how the wish lists are functioning and what are the steps, let's just take a look at this sheet where we've created like a full setup or like a step-by-step navigation for your easy understanding. So it's always good to have this kind of a page open on your computer screen so that you know exactly that if you're creating a slot-based wish list, the step one is going to be to ask the sites and preceptors when they can accept the students. The step two will be to ask the students to rank the sites and preceptors that can accept them. And then the step three is to simply make the match. In a similar fashion, we've got all of these different wish lists that we've listed out on this particular table, and you can use this for future requirements as well whenever you're creating a wish list. Moving on to the next step, now let's go ahead and take a look at how do we actually create a wish list. Now, to create a wish list, there are two different ways to get onto a page. First thing on the main exact dashboard, do you see a tile that says placement? Or if you're using the quick access menu on the left hand side, the three lines, you will see something that says placement. If you simply click on that, you will be navigated onto this page, which shows you all the course offering names along with the course numbers. Now over here, all you have to do is you simply have to just click on that course offering name. So in this example, we've clicked on the wishlist course. That's the course offering name. As soon as you click on that, you will be navigated onto the next screen, which is the placement screen. Now in this one, if you notice on the top ribbon, you've got an option that says wishlist, just how it has been highlighted in the pink box. As soon as you click on this particular button, you will be able to see a list of all the previous wish lists that you've ever created for this particular course. In a normal scenario, you would not see any wish list there because if it's a new course, then all you have to do is you simply have to go ahead and click on Create Wish List, which is on the extreme right-hand side of your screen. Now, as soon as you click on Create Wishlist, you move on to the next page where you will be able to see the 6 steps that you have to follow for creating a wishlist. On the left-hand side, if you notice, it says basic details, wishlist type, questionnaire, selecting the students, email notifications, and then the summary. So we will be taking a look at all of these different options in a detailed understanding today. So first things first, on the right-hand side of the page, you see that we've added the basic details, which says the wishlist name, the view date, and the open date, and then finally the close date of that wishlist. So as we already know, view date and open date is the date when the wishlist will actually be available for the student to give their preferences. And then the close date would be the final date when the students are, not able to go ahead and give their preferences anymore. Once we've added in all of those information, we will simply move on to the next part of that page, which is selecting the different type of wish list that we want to use. Okay. So here you've got an option to select a slot-based wish list, a location-based wish list, a my request, a setting-based, or a location area-based, all of these different types. Now, the best thing that I want to highlight over here is very critical is that only and only for the slot and location based wish list, you can have a combination of this wish list. Like, for example, what happens is in a scenario, you have some slots on your system and you also have some locations that you want to give that as a choice to your students. You can combine both of these wish lists together. So that wish list can be a slot and location based wish list. All you have to do is you just have to click on that radio button next to the setup slot and location based wish list. As soon as you've clicked on that, you then have the ability of selecting which type of a wish list are you willing to create. So you can just click on those check boxes which says slot wish list and location wish list, and then accordingly your wish list will be functioning. As soon as we are done with this particular page, all we have to do is go ahead and click on the next button on the extreme right hand side of your screen, the top right hand corner. We'll move on to the next page where we are actually looking at creating a slot based wish list. Now, in this, what happens is if you notice on the left hand side, we have now moved on to the step two of creating this wish list. So, the step two includes what all information are you looking to include in your wish list. So if you notice over here, it says slot to include on the right hand side of the page. In that, you've got different types of settings. Now, you have the ability as administrators or as the users who are creating these wish lists, you have the ability of removing some of these settings that should not be available for the students to select. So, for example, there are a few slots that have been provided to you as acute care, and you do not want your students to select any of the acute care slots. All you have to do is you have to click on the pencil icon on the extreme right hand side for the settings. And once you click on that, you will be able to see a page that opens up and shows you all the settings. You just have to remove or uncheck the acute care setting. As soon as you do that, you can hit the save button, and that particular setting and the slot, whichever is given to you based on that setting, will not be showcased to the student. In a similar fashion, you have the ability of selecting states as well. Which states do you want your students to select the slots for? And then it's completely your choice which states you want to keep in that particular wish list. In a similar fashion, you've got location tags. Any locations that you've tagged specifically based on your internal discussions. It could be the final clinical only or no tags assigned or anything of that sort. In a similar fashion, you've got location areas and the location categories as well. Now, moving on from there, once you've done changes to all of these information, or if you've just left it the way it is, you're now moving on to the next part of this page, which is if you scroll down a bit, you will see the additional information part. Here, what you have to do is now this is the critical part of that wish list. Here, you have to select whether you want to show the count of available slots to your students. If yes, you will simply just click on that toggle button and switch that feature on. Then the next step is to show the status of available slots to your students. The third one is to show the rotation name of available slots to your students. And then the fourth one is do you want to show the clinical instructor details of the available slots to the students? Now, in this one, what happens is the students will be also able to see who the clinical instructor is going to be for that particular slot, and then they can give their preferences. Now, all of this does not, you do not have to keep that in your mind all the time. Whenever you're on this page, if you simply hover your mouse cursor right on this eye icons right next to each of these sentences, you will be able to see what does this sentence exactly mean and what is the feature related to it. Okay? Moving on from there, do you also want your students to upload a resume or like an application material for each of the ranked preferences? Most of the schools they prefer keeping that feature off, but then only for some rare scenarios, if you want that to happen, that your students should provide you a resume for each preference that they give you, you can go ahead and switch that feature on. Moving on from there, the kind of slot status that you're willing to provide to your students or the kind of slot status that you want to give a choice for to your students, you can select that as a confirmed or tentative, or you can select both. Then the slot type would be regular, first come, first serve, resume required, interview required, must be filled, or requested by student. All of these are different types of slots. In a normal scenario, you would always get the regular and the first come, first serve. Now, moving on from there, the next part over here is the minimum required. Now, if you notice, there is an asterisk sign right next to it. So to go ahead to the next page, you will have to give a minimum required preference for your students. That means you're telling your students that at the minimum, like the bare minimum should be at least one preference that they should provide to you. Or you can select two or three based on your requirement. And then what is the maximum allowed limit that you want to give to your students? The next part over here is the instructions. Now, I'm sorry, this screenshot is not very clear with regards to the instructions for the students, but this is where you will be putting in the detailed instruction of for your students as to how they need to go ahead and access the wish list, or you can even specify if there's any specific program details that you want your students to consider before they fill up the wish list. Moving on to the next step, here we are just taking a look at the location-based wish list. In this one, if you notice, similar kind of a page setting, but here you've got an option to select the kind of locations you want to include. So you've got an option of selecting including all the locations. Then the radio button is available to include locations that haven't offered a slot, or the third one, which is the include the locations that have offered the slot. In the similar fashion, once you've made those selections with regards to the radio buttons, this is like just a single select option. You will now have the ability of selecting the settings that you want to include in this particular wish list. In a similar fashion, you've got the states, location tags, location areas, and the location categories. Again, once you move on from here, you've got the additional information section where you will be selecting all of those information, which says location area, location categories, the minimum required and the maximum allowed, along with the instructions for the student. Now, moving on from there, I just want to give you one understanding before, like whenever you're on any of these pages, everywhere you see that eye icon, that is the place where you will be getting an understanding of what exactly does this section mean. So I would recommend you all to always hover the mouse cursor on these eye icons so you're able to understand what exactly does this particular section mean or what information you need to add in over there. The third type that we're looking at right now is the location area based. Here, if you notice, this wish list, this setup is looking pretty small, where you're only selecting the location areas based on whatever settings you've made in the system. Once that has been updated, you will select the minimum required, maximum allowed, and then the instruction. Moving on from there, you've got the My Request type of a wish list. Now, My Request is actually being covered as a full session just before this webinar. So you can refer to the recorded session in our Vimeo page. But I just want to give you a slight understanding that My Request is a place where you will just be selecting the form that the student has to fill. As soon as you've selected that form, you will also select for which rotation you're asking for this My Request, and then again the minimum required preferences, and then the maximum allowed. Moving on from here, we will now take a look at the setting-based wish list. Now here you're just going to be selecting the kind of settings that you want your students to select, and then based on these settings, your students will be giving you the preferences. These settings can be included or removed as per your convenience, so you can simply just click on that pencil icon and remove whichever settings you do not want to be included in that wish list. Moving on from here, we're now looking at the rotation preference based wish list. Now, this is a relatively new kind of a wish list that we've got. In this wish list, it's very simple. You're allowing your students to select which rotations they're wanting to be placed. And then based on that, once you select these rotations from the drop down, you will now have the ability of selecting minimum required and maximum allowed, and then go ahead to the next page. I hope we're all clear and I'm not going too fast. If in case you feel I'm going too fast, please do let us know in the chat box. Yeah. Moving on from there, on to the next step, which is the third step of this wish list creation. That's the questionnaire. Now, everyone on every wish list has the ability of creating a questionnaire for your students. Now, what you can do is over here, what kind of a question you can ask is, do you have reliable transport, or are you willing to relocate, or do you know how to drive, or something of that sort. As soon as you've added those questions over here, you click on the yes button and you've added your questions. You can even reposition your questions the way you want it to be. For example, the are you willing to relocate question should be number one, and then the do you have a reliable transport should be number two. This question can be moved up and down by simply clicking on the six small dots on the left-hand side of the question. Once you've made those selections, you can even delete those questions and add more if you want, and then simply go ahead and click on the next button. As soon as you click on the next button, you will be moved on to the next step, which is selecting your student. Now, in the selecting student step, I want to just explain some of the items very specifically. Is that first thing, what you're going to be doing is in a normal scenario, you would want to select all the students in that entire list. So to do that, At once, you will simply have to click on the checkbox right next to the word that says student. If you simply click on this first checkbox, automatically it will select all the students for you in that list. Now, what happens if you do not want one of the students to get the wish list? Like, for example, Omar Dixon should not get the wish list or they should not get the preference list. You will simply go ahead and uncheck his name, and that student would not be included in the wish list. Now, one very, very important part over here is to automatically update student selection when the course registration is updated. Now, what happens, like if you, for example, you've already created a wish list, and there is some changes that the program wants to make with regards to a particular course. As soon as you've made those changes over there for the course, do you want those changes to be also included in the wish list automatically? Because it's very common that someone might make a change, make a wish list, then make some changes into the course, and then the wish list shows incorrect information. So if you click on that checkbox, your wish list will automatically keep itself updated as and when there is any changes made to the courses or to any of the details. As soon as you've done all of these selections over here, you will simply go ahead and click on the next button, which will take you to the next step, which is our email notification. Now, in this page, you have the ability of selecting three different types of notifications. Now, I would recommend personally that you select all three of them because these are very relevant. So the first one is to notify your students when the wishlist opens, which is obviously we need that kind of a notification. The second one would be to notify your students 24 hours before the wishlist closes. So again, it's like a good reminder for your students. Then the third one is to notify your students when the wishlist actually closes. Now, this is also required so that the student knows that now I do not have the ability to make any changes or updates. As soon as you've clicked on all three of these check boxes, you can go ahead and click on the next button, which will take you to the next page for the summary. But before we look at the summary, let's take a look at how these emails look like. The notification email. So this one is for when the wish list has actually closed. If you notice, it says the subject line, the name of the wish list, which we've already added. This wish list for the course name is closed, and then the student name, and then accordingly, all of these merge fields have been included to ensure that the student gets this personalized email whenever they're getting a notification. Moving on, we'll see the second notification, which is when the wish list, when it's 24 hours before the wish list closes. Again, in a similar fashion, you've got all of the merge fields included for that email to look more personalized. You will now move on to the next step, which is the summary screen. Now, in the summary screen of this wishlist creation that we just did, you have the ability of checking if everything looks all right before you can even save that wishlist. Not that you cannot make any changes later on, but then just to ensure that everything is on the same page and you've got all the information that you wanted to create for that wishlist has been included. So you can simply scroll down on this page and check all of the details that you've added. Now, this is a slot-based wish list that you are able to see on the screen. You will simply go ahead and hit the save button if everything looks all right to you. In this way, you've just gone ahead and created your wish list. Do we have any questions? Me, Ramya, can you just check if there are any questions in the chat box?
Yeah, I think we have answered most of it on the chat. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So moving on, let's just go ahead and get an understanding of what should be the next step after we've created the wish list. So normally, with a normal understanding, the next step after a wish list is created by the school would be how does the student look at it or how does the student access it? So let's take a look at the student view of this particular wish list. So in this particular presentation, I'll show you from the student's login as to how does the wishlist get access and how does the student share their preferences. So the next screen, we're going to be able to see the student dashboard, which is this simple dashboard that the student can see. The student will simply log in to their Exxat Prism credentials. As soon as they're on this page, they will click on coursework. Once they click on coursework, they move on to the next screen where they're able to see all the courses where they're currently registered with. So in this scenario, the student Jeff Greenberg is being registered with DPT 612 Clinical Experience 1, where this student on the extreme right sees a message that says may need attention. Do you notice that which says wish list closes on June 30th, 2024? Now the student knows exactly that he has to click on this particular course name to get more details about it. As soon as the student goes ahead and clicks on the course name, they will be able to see this kind of a screen where they will be able to see the course name right at the top, and in the course activities, which is a default routing for this particular page, where the student will see a wish list and they simply have to just click on the wish list name, which is a DPT 123 Adult Medicine 1. The student has gone ahead and clicked on that particular wish list name, and now they're able to see the instructions before they can even begin the wish list. As soon as they click on the wish list name, the instructions are something that the student has to go through first. So they've gone through the instructions, they've read it all, and now they go ahead and click on the start button. As soon as they click on the start button, they're able to see this kind of a screen where they have to first explore the slots. Now, as we already know, we're looking at a slot based wish list. So at the top of the screen, you must be noticing there are only three steps. So the first step is to explore the slots. The second step is to rank the selections. And then the third step is to review and submit. So the first step, let's do the exploring of the slots. The student clicks on the state drop down, which is an important field. They select whichever state they want. As soon as they've gone ahead and selected the state and hit apply, they're able to see a result of all the available slots for all of the states that they've selected. Now, in this scenario, you've got three different slots available for three different locations. So, student has the ability of clicking on the add button to add that location as a preference with the slot, or they can even go ahead and click on the remove button to remove that location from their preferences. Now, in a scenario where there is no location mentioned by the site, like the site has just given you a slot, but they've told you that we do not have a location confirmation yet, but we will confirm that to you later. For now, you have also included that slot, and this is how it shows you location not known for the second slot, which is the Castle Medical Clinic. Now, in this scenario, we've just seen how does a student navigate or how does a student add or remove preferences from their wish list selection. Let's move on to the next screen. Now, here, this one is showing you a location-based wish list. So in a similar fashion, the student will be selecting the state, whichever they want to get placed in. They've selected that state, and based on that particular state that they've selected, they've got all the locations that are available. Again, the student will simply click on the add button, and they will be able to add that particular location into their preference list. Now, what happens if a student wants to see more details about this particular location or any particular location, even on the slot based wish list? The student has the ability of simply clicking on the location name, which is in this scenario, it's Angel Wayne Clinic. The student clicks on it, and this type of a small drawer would open up where they will be able to see each and every detailed understanding of that location. It shows them the location address, the site that this location is attached to, the location details, in area, out of area, any settings, location requirements, the contract documents. If in case the contract is shared with the student, the student will be able to see that over here. Then any other documents that are there, and then additional information like housing and parking information or any forms that are required. Once the student has gone through all of this information and they think that this can be added in the preference list, this student will be able to just close this drawer and add that in their preferences. Moving on to the next one, which is a slot and location based combination wish list. Now, if you remember, while I was showing you the different types of wish lists, I showed you an option of combining two different wish lists with one. So here you've got four different steps. In the first step, the student will have to explore the slot. Now, to explore the slot, again, they will select a state, they will see the options, they will add or remove whatever they want, and then move on. But there's something that I also wanted to highlight over here is on the extreme right hand side of all of these wish list pages, you'll be able to see what is the minimum required and what is the maximum allowed. So the student knows exactly that there is a minimum requirement that I have to fulfill for this particular page, and then what is the maximum that I can go up to. So let's just suppose the student has a minimum required of one preference for this particular wish list. The student has selected one slot. Now, to move on to the next screen, they do not have a next button. All they have to do is click on the explore location on the top ribbon. Do you see that? The second step is to explore locations. The student will click on that and move on to the next step, which is to select the preferred location. Now, here again, the student will be able to see all the locations in your program, and then they will be able to provide you a comprehensive understanding of what locations they want to be placed at. So these locations have not provided a slot to you yet, but this is a list of all the locations. Once the student has given their preferences, they will move on to the next step where they're selecting their rank. Now, in this scenario, what happens is, for example, the student has selected Edna Regional Medical as their rank one, and then they want Angel Wing Clinic to be ranked two instead of the original Edna Regional Medical. What does the student get to do over here is, by simply clicking on those six dots on the left hand side, they can drag up and down with regards to their preference requirements. If a student also wants to give a brief understanding or like a note for the reason for selection for all of these preferences, they also have a notes section on the right hand side of each preference, and they can give you detailed notes over there as to why are they making this selection. If they want to delete the selection from their list, they can also go ahead and click on the trash icon on the extreme right hand side of the screen. Now, one thing which I would always recommend, and I always do recommend to my schools, is that tell the students to save your wish list as a draft because that's the most important thing. For example, a student has made some changes and suddenly they had to go somewhere else. They should not, like the wish list should not get vanished from their computer. So it's always better to go ahead and save it as a draft so that they do not miss out or do not lose out on the data. Moving on to the next step now would be the student view for a setting-based wish list. Now, in this scenario, you have an option over here. If you see, the first step is to explore the ranks and settings, and then the second step is to review and submit. The student will be able to see a list of all the settings on the left-hand side of the screen, and then they can individually select which settings they want to be placed in, and they can share their preferences. Or if in case the student wants to add in all the settings just to be random, they can go ahead and click on that button that says add all settings. And then on the right hand side of the page, they can even rank or they can move up and down with regards to what preferences they want to make and what's the kind of ranking. Moving on to the next step, after the student has clicked on save as draft, we're now able to see the student view, wherein the ability to ask questions to the student for their with regards to their placement. If you remember, we did add in some questions that were like, "Do you have reliable transportation?" The student has answered that as a yes. And then, Do you have housing available in other states? The student has again selected that as yes, and has also given some state details over here to us. As soon as that has been done, the student will click on Save as Draft and move on to the next step, which is Review and Submit. Now, this is the most important part of that wish list, where the student will first be able to review all the ranks that they've provided, and then they will also be able to see the answers that they provided to those specific questions. Now, if a student wants to voluntarily share their resume or like a cover letter for the placement, they can simply go ahead and click on Browse to Upload on the right hand side of the screen, and they can upload a document. Or if they want to just add in some notes, they can go ahead and add the notes as well in the similar section. But the last thing over here is to click on that acknowledgement checkbox. Unless and until the student goes ahead and clicks on that acknowledgement checkbox, the student will not be able to submit the wish list, and it's the most mandatory field on the wish list section. So let's suppose the student has gone ahead, clicked on that acknowledgement checkbox, and gone ahead and submitted the wish list. This is where the student's work has been done. Now, the next thing that we have to do is to review the wish list and the responses that we've got from the student. Moving on from there, we will now go ahead and take a look at how do we review the wish list. So simply, again, I would like to show you the navigation from the main dashboard. If you're clicking on placement, or even from the quick access menu, the three lines on the left, if you're clicking on placements, you will be able to select the course offering for which you're looking at. Once you select the course offering, you will be able to see the top ribbon that says rotation setup, slots, wish list. There you have to click on wish list, and then you will be able to see the name of the wish list which you're looking at. So in this scenario, in this example, we are looking at the wish list DPT 123 Adult Medicine 1. And if you notice right next to it, the it is showing us the status of what's happened on that wish list. So if you notice, it says one student has submitted and 4 are yet to submit. That means a total of 5 students were offered this wish list, out of which one student has already filled it up and submitted it. So we go ahead and check what does it look like on the next page. So you will simply click on the wishlist name and you will be routed onto the wishlist management page where you have the ability of seeing all of the information with regards to your wishlist. So if you see at the top of the screen, it's showing you the graphical numbers of what is the status on each of the tiles. So there are 4 students on the not started bit. There are 0 in progress. One student has already gone ahead and submitted the wish list. There are 0 which are in the review status yet. And then there is the not applicable tab. Now, let's just go ahead and take a look at what's happening down on the page. Now, do you see that button that says download preferences? This is a particular preference list that you will be able to download from the page directly. But one thing to remember over here is that this report is updated every 24 hours. So it's always better to wait a day before you can download your student preferences. Okay? Moving on from there, you've got the filter icon to filter out different types of statuses on your wish list to get the accurate result. Now, to review the particular wish list, we are looking at a student that's called as Jamie Porter. We will simply go ahead and click on that submitted status. So as soon as we click over there, we're able to see a new drawer that opens up and shows us the wish list notes that the student has added and then the preferences that the student has given. Now, if we as a program want to make any changes, we can simply go ahead and move these ranks up and down the way we want to, or we can even go ahead and exclude this particular, requirement preference from the student's placement. Now, once all of that has been done, on the right-hand side, there's an option that you're able to select the status of the wish list. So if everything looks all right for you, you will go ahead and mark that as a reviewed and hit the update button. So that clears your job. But if in case you find that there's any kind of an error or you want your student to work again on the wish list or to resolve any errors, you will simply mark that as in progress and hit the update button. So the student will again be able to access the wish list and see what's gone wrong. And to even help you further on that, you've got a note section over there that says notes shared with the student. You can simply add in the notes of what changes are you wanting your students to make. Once you've given all those understanding to the student will be able to make those corrections on the wish list. Now, let's suppose you've gone ahead and hit the reviewed button and you've gone ahead and submitted that particular wish list. So this is where your job has been completed. Now, let's take a look at the questionnaire-based wish list. If you remember in the beginning, I had mentioned to you that there is a type of wish list where you can ask specific questions to your students, and based on those answers that you receive as responses, you can make your student placement. Now, for example, let's suppose your 4 of your students have actually submitted their questionnaire-based wish list along with the answers, and now you want to see the responses. What you would do is, after 24 hours of your students updating that information and submitting that wish list, you will go ahead and click on download responses. As soon as you click on that download responses page button, a new page would open up with a report. That's the Excel spreadsheet report, which would look something like this, where you will have the student's name, the student's email address, the question that you had asked them, and right next to it, the answer affiliated to that question. So based on this particular understanding, you can go ahead and make the student placement. Now, placement is something which is a completely detailed understanding of how placement has been done, or how do we do a placement for different types of preferences or different types of students. So we will be covering that in our upcoming session. But till then, what I recommend y'all is to go ahead and take a look at our Help Center documents as well. So on the next page, here we see that there are some Help Center, help articles that we have available for the students. They can read it along, or if they want, they can even go onto our Vimeo platform by clicking on that link and access the entire playlist to see how do they complete the wish list and how do they access it. Or if you want some help with the program administrators, you can simply follow this link and go through some help articles or go to the Vimeo channel and take a look at the videos that are available for wish list management. Moving on, we've got a next session planned for July the 11th. That's a Thursday. So where we will be talking about placements and the placement assist feature in the part 9 of our 15 part training series, Prism training series, I would recommend you all to simply click on this register link and register for that upcoming webinar. Or if you want to see any of the past webinars, you can even click on the exact webinar links and go ahead and access those webinars. One thing I'd like to note over here is that if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us through our email addresses. Thank you very much. That's about it from my end today.